The morning light filtered through the massive windows of the penthouse as Jonathan Pierce stood in his home office, staring at the open steel safe that contained more cash than most people would see in a lifetime. His fingers trembled slightly as he arranged the bills in neat stacks, making sure they were clearly visible from the doorway. This was at the moment he would finally prove what he had suspected all along about people and their true nature when faced with temptation. Jonathan had built his fortune from nothing, clawing his way up through years of betrayal and disappointment. Every business partner who had tried to cheat him, every friend who had borrowed money and disappeared, every employee who had stolen from him had taught him the same bitter lesson. Everyone had a price, and given the right opportunity, anyone would take what wasn't theirs. Now at 45 he was worth millions, but the wealth felt hollow when surrounded by people he couldn't trust. The sound of keys jingling in the front door made his heart race. Gabrielle Washington would be arriving any moment for her weekly deep cleaning of his penthouse. For 6 months she had worked for him with quiet efficiency, never asking for raises, never complaining about the extra tasks he added to her list, never even making small talk beyond polite greetings. Her silence had always bothered him. What was she hiding? What was she really thinking as she moved through his home, seeing his expensive belongings, his lavish lifestyle? He positioned himself behind the partially closed office door, his phone ready to record whatever happened next. The cleaning supplies cart rolled across the marble floor of the hallway, accompanied by the soft humming of a gospel song. Gabrielle always hummed while she worked, the same few melodies over and over. He had never asked her about them, never shown any interest in her life beyond whether his floors were spotless and his shirts properly pressed. As her footsteps approached his office, Jonathan felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. Part of him genuinely hoped she would prove him wrong, that she would see the money and simply continue with her work. But his cynical side, hardened by years of disappointment, was already preparing for the inevitable moment when she would reveal her true character. He had left exactly $5,000 and $20 bills stacked on the safe's middle shelf, an amount that would be life-changing for someone in her position but merely pocket change for him. The humming stopped. Jonathan held his breath as he heard her pause in the doorway, knowing she must have spotted the open safe and the visible money. Through the crack in the door, he could see her profile, a woman in her mid-30s with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of hard work and sacrifice. She wore the same navy blue uniform every week, always clean but showing signs of wear around the edges. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried herself with a dignity that had always puzzled him. Gabrielle stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, her cleaning supplies forgotten as she stared at the open safe. Jonathan watched her face carefully, looking for signs of greed, calculation, or the internal struggle he expected to see when someone was deciding whether to steal. Instead, her expression showed something he hadn't anticipated: genuine concern. She looked around the office as if checking for signs of a break-in, her brow furrowed with worry rather than temptation. She took a tentative step into the office, then another, her movements careful and deliberate. Jonathan's finger hovered over the record button on his phone, ready to capture the moment when she would reach for the money. But Gabrielle didn't move toward the safe. Instead, she began cleaning the office as she always did, starting with the windows and working her way around the room. She dusted his desk, organized his papers, and vacuumed the carpet, all while the open safe with its visible cash sat just feet away. The morning stretched on, and Jonathan found himself growing increasingly uncomfortable in his hiding spot. His legs cramped, and his back ached from crouching behind the door, but Gabrielle continued her methodical cleaning routine as if nothing unusual was happening. She moved with the same quiet efficiency she always displayed, humming softly under her breath and paying no attention to the money that seemed to call out from the safe's shadows. As she prepared to leave the office, Gabrielle paused one final time near the safe. Jonathan tensed, certain this was the moment she would finally succumb to temptation. But instead of reaching for the cash, she did something completely unexpected. She pulled a small piece of paper from her uniform pocket and carefully placed it inside the safe, positioning it so it wouldn't disturb the money but would be clearly visible to anyone who looked inside. Jonathan watched in stunned silence as she quietly closed the office door behind her and continued with the rest of her cleaning routine. The sound of her cart rolling down the hallway and her gentle humming gradually faded as she moved to other parts of the penthouse. He remained hidden behind the door for several more minutes, trying to process what he had just witnessed. In all his scenarios and expectations, he had never imagined this outcome. When he finally emerged from his hiding spot, his legs shaky from crouching for so long, Jonathan found himself staring at the piece of paper Gabrielle had left behind. His hands trembled as he reached for it, uncertain of what message awaited him. The simple white envelope was sealed with careful precision, and his name was written on the front in neat, careful handwriting that suggested someone who had learned to write beautifully despite limited formal education. The weight of the envelope in his hands felt significant, as if it contained something far more valuable than the cash that surrounded it. Jonathan realized that his test had backfired completely. Instead of exposing Gabrielle's character, it was about to reveal something about his own assumptions and prejudices that he wasn't sure he was ready to face. Gabrielle Washington's day began at 4:30 in the morning, the same time it had started every day for the past 3 years. She moved quietly through her small 2-bedroom apartment, careful not to wake her sleeping daughters or her mother, who occupied the living room that had been converted into a makeshift bedroom. The morning routine was a delicate dance of efficiency: shower, dress, prepare breakfast, and write encouraging notes for her children's lunch boxes before heading out into the pre-dawn darkness. The bus ride to the wealthy district where she cleaned houses gave her time to pray and prepare mentally for the day ahead. She carried a small notebook where she kept track of each client's preferences and schedules, treating her work with the same professionalism that others might bring to corporate boardrooms. Cleaning wasn't just her job, it was her mission to provide for her family and maintain their dignity despite their circumstances. Her mother, Rosa, had been diagnosed with diabetes 2 years earlier, and the medication costs consumed nearly half of Gabrielle's monthly income. The rest went to rent, utilities, groceries, and her daughter's school supplies. There was never anything left over for extras, emergency funds, or the small luxuries that other families might take for granted. Every dollar was accounted for, every expense carefully considered, and often sacrificed for more pressing needs. 8-year-old Destiny and 10-year-old Hope were exceptional students who deserved opportunities that Gabrielle couldn't afford to give them. They attended the local public school, which did its best with limited resources, but Gabrielle often lay awake at night wondering what kind of future she could realistically provide for them. She had dropped out of high school when she became pregnant with Hope, and while she had earned her GED later, the lack of a college degree limited her employment options significantly. Working for Jonathan Pierce was both a blessing and a source of quiet frustration. The weekly payment of $300 was essential to her family's survival, but being surrounded by such extreme wealth while struggling to afford her mother's medication created an internal tension she rarely acknowledged. His penthouse was larger than the entire apartment building where she lived, and he owned multiple cars that cost more than she would earn in several years. What bothered her most wasn't the disparity itself, but Jonathan's apparent assumption that she was invisible. In 6 months of working for him, he had never asked about her family, her goals, or even her name preference. He simply called her by her first name as if she were a child rather than a professional adult with her own life and responsibilities. She had tried to engage him in polite conversation on several occasions, but his responses were always brief and dismissive. On this particular morning, as Gabrielle approached Jonathan's office with her cleaning supplies, she noticed immediately that something was different. The massive steel safe that was usually closed and locked stood wide open, revealing stacks of cash that made her stomach clench with anxiety. Her first thought wasn't about the money itself, but about Jonathan's safety. Had there been a break-in? Was he hurt? Had someone forced him to open the safe and then fled with part of the contents? She stood in the doorway for several minutes, her heart racing as she considered what to do. Should she call the police? Should she try to contact Jonathan at his office? The responsible thing would be to report what appeared to be a crime scene, but she also knew that her presence in the room with an open safe full of money could easily be misinterpreted if someone else discovered the situation. The cash represented more money than she had ever seen in one place, enough to pay for her mother's medication for years, enough to move her family to a better neighborhood, enough to send her daughters to private schools where they could receive the education they deserved. For just a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what life would be like without the constant stress of financial uncertainty, without the humiliation of using food stamps at the grocery store, without lying awake at night calculating and recalculating the monthly budget. But the fantasy lasted only seconds before reality reasserted itself. Taking the money would solve her immediate problems while creating far worse ones. She would lose her job, face criminal charges, and destroy the reputation for honesty and reliability that she had worked years to build. More importantly, she would be teaching her daughters that desperation justified theft, that integrity was a luxury they couldn't afford. Gabrielle began cleaning the office as she always did, but her movements were mechanical while her mind raced with conflicting emotions. She felt angry at Jonathan for leaving the safe open, whether intentionally or accidentally, because it forced her to confront temptations she preferred not to face. She felt frustrated by the casual way he displayed wealth that could transform her family's circumstances. Most of all, she felt sad that her financial situation was so precarious that the sight of readily available money could cause her such internal turmoil. As she dusted the bookshelves and organized the papers on his desk, Gabrielle found herself thinking about her daughters' faces when she had to tell them they couldn't afford the field trip fees or new school clothes. She thought about her mother's worried expression when she rationed her medication to make it last longer. She thought about her own dreams of returning to school someday, dreams that seemed increasingly impossible with each passing year. But she also thought about the pride in her daughters' eyes when they introduced her to their teachers, the way they bragged to their friends about how hard their mother worked to take care of the family. She thought about the lessons she tried to teach them about character and integrity, lessons that would be meaningless if she abandoned those principles when they became inconvenient. By the time she finished cleaning the office, Gabrielle had made her decision. She pulled a piece of paper from her pocket, part of a letter she had started writing to her daughters about family values and perseverance, and began composing a different kind of message. Her handwriting was careful and deliberate as she poured her heart onto the page, explaining feelings and circumstances she had never shared with anyone. The letter was both a response to the impossible situation she found herself in and a declaration of the principles that guided her life. She folded it carefully, placed it in an envelope from her cleaning supply kit, and wrote Jonathan's name on the front. Placing it gently inside the safe felt like both an act of faith and a quiet form of protest against the assumptions she suspected he held about people like her. As she left the office and continued with her cleaning routine, Gabrielle felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. She had faced a test of her character and remained true to the values she was trying to instill in her daughters. Whatever consequences might follow from her decision, she could face them with a clear conscience and the knowledge that she had chosen integrity over immediate relief. The letter Gabrielle had placed in the safe represented 3 sleepless nights of careful thought and numerous drafts that she had written and discarded. She had struggled to find the right words to express the complex emotions churning inside her, gratitude mixed with frustration, hope tempered by realistic acceptance of her circumstances, and a deep desire to be seen as more than just the invisible woman who cleaned his home. Her original intent had been to write a simple note explaining that she had found the safe open and was concerned about his security. But as she sat at her small kitchen table after her daughters had gone to bed, the words that emerged were far more personal and revealing than she had planned. The letter became a window into her life, her struggles, and the faith that sustained her through the most difficult moments. "Dear Mr. Pierce," she had written, "I found your safe open today and wanted you to know that I was worried someone might have broken into your home. I hope you are safe and that nothing was stolen. I also wanted to write this letter because I realized that in 6 months of working for you, you don't really know anything about me, and I thought maybe you might want to understand the person who takes care of your home." The words had flowed from there, surprising her with their honesty and depth. She wrote about her daughters, describing Hope's love of mathematics and Destiny's artistic talents, sharing her pride in their academic achievements despite the challenges they faced. She wrote about her mother's illness and the difficult decisions she had to make about medication costs versus other family needs. She explained her own educational goals and the dream of someday earning a college degree that would allow her to provide better opportunities for her children. "I know you probably think I'm just the cleaning lady," she had continued, "but I wanted you to know that I take great pride in my work and in maintaining your beautiful home. Every week when I clean your office, I admire the books on your shelves and wonder what it would be like to have the education and opportunities that allowed you to build such success. I don't resent your wealth, I admire it and hope someday to create something similar for my own family." The most difficult part of the letter to write had been the section about the open safe and the money she had seen inside. Gabrielle had wanted to be completely honest about the temptation she had felt while also making it clear that taking the money had never been a real consideration. She struggled to find words that wouldn't sound preachy or self-righteous while still expressing the principles that guided her decisions. "When I saw all that money in your safe today, I won't lie and say I didn't think about what it could mean for my family," she had written. "For just a moment, I imagined being able to pay for my mother's medicine without choosing between that and buying my daughters new shoes for school. I imagined being able to say yes when they asked to go on field trips with their classmates. But I also thought about the kind of example I want to set for my children and the kind of person I want to be." She had gone on to explain that her faith played a central role in her decision-making process, not in a way that she hoped would impress him, but as an honest explanation of her worldview. "I believe that how we respond to difficult situations reveals our true character," she had written. "I also believe that taking shortcuts, even when we're desperate, usually leads to consequences that are worse than the original problems we were trying to solve." The letter concluded with an expression of gratitude that was both genuine and carefully considered. Gabrielle had wanted to acknowledge that despite her financial struggles, she recognized that working for Jonathan had provided stability and income that many in her situation didn't have. She had also wanted to communicate her hopes for the future without asking for charity or special treatment. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to work for you," she had written. "This job has allowed me to support my family while maintaining our dignity and independence. I hope that my work has met your standards and that you can trust me to continue caring for your home with the same attention and respect I have always tried to show. I also hope that if you ever have additional opportunities in your businesses, you might consider me for positions where my reliability and work ethic could be valuable." Writing the letter had been emotionally exhausting but also cathartic. For the first time in months, Gabrielle felt like she had taken control of her narrative instead of simply accepting whatever assumptions others might make about her circumstances or character. She had presented herself as a complete person with dreams, values, and capabilities rather than just a service provider whose personal life was irrelevant. The decision to place the letter in the safe had felt symbolic. She was literally putting her words in the same space as his money, making them equally visible and important. It was a quiet form of communication that respected his privacy while ensuring that her message couldn't be ignored or dismissed. She had no idea how he would respond or whether he would respond at all, but she felt satisfied that she had been true to herself and her principles. As she went about her cleaning routine that morning, Gabrielle found herself humming with more energy than usual. The spiritual songs that normally helped her focus on her work seemed to carry additional meaning, reminding her of the strength and guidance she drew from her faith. She cleaned each room with extra care, knowing that this might be her last day working in the penthouse if Jonathan reacted poorly to her letter. But even the possibility of losing the job didn't diminish her sense of peace about her decision. She had faced a test of her character and had chosen to respond with honesty and integrity rather than desperation or resentment. Whatever happened next, she could face it knowing that she had remained true to the values she was working so hard to instill in her daughters. The letter in the safe represented more than just her response to finding money within reach. It was her declaration of dignity, her assertion of worth, and her quiet challenge to Jonathan to see her as more than just an invisible worker in his privileged world. The envelope felt heavier in Jonathan's hands than its actual weight could justify, as if the words inside carried the accumulated weight of assumptions, prejudices, and misunderstandings that had shaped his worldview for decades. He had expected to find evidence of theft or at least some sign of internal struggle, but instead he held what appeared to be a personal letter written with the same careful attention his housekeeper brought to every aspect of her work. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope, uncertain whether he was more afraid of what he might find or what he might learn about himself in the process. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, suggesting someone who had learned to write beautifully despite limited formal education opportunities. Each letter was carefully formed, each word precisely spelled, revealing an intelligence and attention to detail that he had somehow overlooked during their brief professional interactions. As Jonathan began reading, he found himself moving to his desk chair, needing support as the words challenged everything he thought he knew about Gabrielle Washington and, by extension, about people in general. The letter began with genuine concern for his safety and security, demonstrating the kind of thoughtfulness he had assumed was rare among people in her position. She hadn't seen an opportunity for personal gain. She had seen a potential crime scene and had been worried about his well-being. The description of her family life hit him like a physical blow. 2 daughters excelling in school despite financial hardships, a mother struggling with diabetes and medication costs, a woman juggling multiple responsibilities while maintaining her dignity and work ethic. Jonathan realized that in 6 months of employing Gabrielle, he had never asked a single question about her life outside his penthouse, never shown any interest in her as a complete person rather than just a service provider. Her pride in her daughter's achievements shone through every sentence she wrote about them. Hope's mathematical abilities, Destiny's artistic talents, their academic success despite attending an underfunded school. These weren't just biographical details but evidence of a mother's love and dedication to providing the best possible foundation for her children's future. Jonathan found himself thinking about his own childhood advantages, the private schools and tutors his wealthy parents had provided without him ever questioning whether he deserved such privileges. The section about her mother's illness forced him to confront the reality of how medical costs could devastate a working family. While he spent more on wine for a single dinner party than Gabrielle earned in a month, she was making impossible choices between medication and other basic necessities. The casual way he had always viewed money as something that existed to be spent on whatever caught his interest suddenly seemed obscene when contrasted with her careful budgeting and constant sacrifice. But it was her description of the temptation she had felt upon seeing the open safe that truly shattered his preconceptions. Rather than denying that she had considered what the money could mean for her family, she had been completely honest about the momentary fantasy of financial relief. Her transparency about human weakness, combined with her explanation of why she had chosen differently, revealed a depth of character that humbled and ashamed him. Her faith, which she described not as a tool to impress him but as the foundation of her decision-making process, represented something Jonathan had lost long ago in his pursuit of wealth and success. The idea that difficult situations revealed true character, that shortcuts usually created worse problems than they solved, these were concepts he had once believed but had abandoned as naive idealism. Seeing them applied with such practical wisdom by someone facing genuine hardship made him question when he had become so cynical. The conclusion of the letter, with its expression of gratitude for the job and subtle request for future opportunities, demonstrated a perfect balance of humility and ambition that impressed him professionally as much as it moved him personally. Gabrielle wasn't asking for charity or special treatment, she was requesting consideration based on her proven reliability and work ethic. She was presenting herself as someone with untapped potential rather than just someone deserving of pity. As Jonathan finished reading and set the letter down on his desk, he realized that his test had revealed far more about his own character than about Gabrielle's. He had set up a scenario designed to confirm his cynical beliefs about human nature, but instead had discovered that his assumptions were based more on his own insecurities and past disappointments than on any objective assessment of the people around him. The tears that began flowing caught him completely off guard. He hadn't cried in years, had trained himself to view emotional displays as weakness in the cutthroat business world where he had built his fortune. But the combination of shame, admiration, and genuine sorrow for his own blindness overwhelmed his usual emotional defenses. Here was a woman who faced challenges that would have broken many people, yet she maintained grace, dignity, and integrity that he had somehow failed to recognize or appreciate. The irony wasn't lost on him that he had tried to test her honesty while being fundamentally dishonest himself, pretending that their relationship was purely professional while harboring deep suspicions about her character, pretending to be a fair employer while never bothering to learn anything about her life or aspirations. He had been so focused on protecting himself from potential betrayal that he had missed the opportunity to recognize and support genuine excellence when it was working in his home every week. Jonathan found himself reading the letter again, this time paying attention to subtle details he had missed initially. The careful way she had structured her thoughts, the sophisticated vocabulary she used despite her limited formal education, the diplomatic manner in which she had addressed their class differences without bitterness or resentment, all of these suggested capabilities that he had completely overlooked. The realization that he had been employing someone of obvious intelligence and potential for 6 months without ever considering whether she might be capable of more challenging work filled him with professional regret as well as personal shame. How many other talented people had he dismissed or ignored because they didn't fit his narrow expectations of what success looked like? As he sat in his expensive office chair, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and success, Jonathan felt emptier than he had in years. All of his achievements suddenly seemed hollow when measured against the quiet dignity and strength Gabrielle demonstrated in her daily life. She was raising 2 children, caring for a sick mother, and maintaining professional excellence while facing financial pressures that would have crushed his spirit entirely. The letter had transformed his understanding not just of Gabrielle but of himself, and Jonathan knew that he could never go back to seeing either of them in the same way again. Jonathan spent the rest of that day unable to concentrate on anything except Gabrielle's letter. He read it repeatedly, each time discovering new layers of meaning and feeling increasingly ashamed of his own assumptions and behavior. By evening, he had made a decision that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. He was going to visit her neighborhood and see for himself the circumstances she had described so eloquently in her letter. The next morning, instead of going to his office, Jonathan drove his modest sedan, not one of his luxury cars, to the address he had found in Gabrielle's employment file. The transformation from his wealthy district to her neighborhood was gradual but unmistakable. Well-maintained buildings gave way to structures that showed their age and the strain of housing families with limited resources. The streets were clean but crowded, filled with people who moved with the purposeful energy of those who couldn't afford to waste time. He parked across the street from Gabrielle's apartment building, a 3-story brick structure that housed multiple families. The building was older but well-maintained, with small gardens where residents had planted flowers and vegetables in whatever space they could claim. Children played on the sidewalk under the watchful eyes of mothers and grandmothers who had created an informal community support system that Jonathan had never needed to understand or appreciate. Watching the rhythm of life in the neighborhood, Jonathan began to understand things about Gabrielle's daily experience that her letter had only hinted at. The way mothers coordinated childcare responsibilities, the careful attention everyone paid to safety and security, the pride residents took in maintaining their homes despite limited resources, all of these revealed a community richness that his wealthy isolation had prevented him from recognizing. He saw Gabrielle emerge from the building around 9 o'clock, dressed in her cleaning uniform and carrying the same professional bag she brought to his penthouse. But seeing her in the context of her own neighborhood, Jonathan noticed details he had missed before. Other residents greeted her warmly, children waved from windows, and she stopped to check on an elderly neighbor who was sitting on the front steps. These weren't the interactions of someone who was just passing through, they were the connections of someone who was an integral part of her community. Following at a respectful distance, Jonathan watched Gabrielle's journey to the bus stop. She walked with the same dignity and purpose she displayed in his home, but here she was also clearly a mother, a daughter, and a neighbor with responsibilities and relationships that extended far beyond her employment. The bus she boarded was crowded with other working people beginning their daily commutes to jobs in wealthier districts, and Jonathan realized that his housekeeper's morning routine involved far more complexity and planning than his own leisurely preparation for the day. The bus ride took nearly an hour, requiring 2 transfers through increasingly affluent neighborhoods. Jonathan followed in his car, watching through the windows as Gabrielle used the travel time to review notes in a small notebook and prepare for her workday. Her professionalism and preparation were evident even in this private moment, reinforcing his growing understanding that he had employed someone whose capabilities far exceeded the simple tasks he had assigned to her. When Gabrielle arrived at her first client's home, a house almost as large as Jonathan's penthouse, he realized that she worked for multiple wealthy families throughout the week. The physical demands of her job became clear as he watched her unload heavy cleaning supplies and equipment, knowing that she would spend the next several hours performing labor-intensive tasks before moving on to her next client. The idea that she managed multiple professional relationships while maintaining the quality standards he had come to expect suddenly seemed far more impressive than he had previously recognized. Jonathan spent the day visiting the places that formed the infrastructure of Gabrielle's daily life. He stopped by the public school her daughters attended, a building that was clearly overcrowded and under-resourced but staffed by dedicated teachers who were doing their best with limited materials. He visited the clinic where her mother received treatment, witnessing firsthand the long waits and bureaucratic obstacles that working families faced when accessing healthcare. He even stopped by the grocery store where Gabrielle shopped, noting the careful way other customers compared prices and used coupons to stretch their budgets. Each location revealed another layer of challenges that Gabrielle navigated with the same quiet competence she brought to her work in his home. The contrast between her daily reality and his own privileged existence was stark and humbling. While he worried about investment returns and business expansion, she was managing complex logistics just to meet her family's basic needs. While he took for granted that quality education and healthcare would be available whenever he needed them, she was constantly advocating and strategizing to ensure her family received adequate services. The most powerful moment of Jonathan's investigation came when he saw Gabrielle pick up her daughters from school. The joy and pride in their faces when they saw their mother, the careful way she listened to their stories about their day, the obvious love and respect that flowed between them, all of these challenged his assumptions about single-parent families and the impact of financial stress on family relationships. Despite the pressures she faced, Gabrielle had created a warm, supportive environment where her children could thrive academically and emotionally. Watching her daughters, Jonathan could see the intelligence and potential that Gabrielle had described in her letter. Hope, the older girl, carried herself with a confidence that suggested natural leadership abilities, while Destiny's animated gestures and expressive face revealed the artistic temperament her mother had mentioned. Both girls were clearly well cared for, well educated, and well loved, despite the financial limitations that constrained their opportunities. The evening routine he observed from his car revealed the careful choreography required to manage a household on a tight budget. Gabrielle helped with homework while preparing dinner, supervised chores while doing laundry, and maintained a cheerful, patient demeanor despite the obvious exhaustion that must have followed her long workday. Her mother, Rosa, moved slowly but contributed what she could to the household tasks, and the intergenerational cooperation Jonathan witnessed spoke to family values and mutual support that his own wealthy upbringing had never required him to develop. As darkness fell and Jonathan finally drove home to his penthouse, he felt fundamentally changed by what he had seen. The gap between his assumptions and Gabrielle's reality was so vast that he questioned everything he thought he knew about poverty, work, and character. Her letter had described her circumstances, but seeing them firsthand had revealed the strength, wisdom and grace required to navigate such challenges while maintaining dignity and hope. The test he had designed to reveal her character had instead revealed his own moral bankruptcy. While she had been demonstrating integrity, capability and resilience right under his nose, he had been too blinded by prejudice and privilege to recognize her worth. The shame he felt was profound, but it was accompanied by something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine admiration for another human being and a desire to use his resources for something more meaningful than personal accumulation. Jonathan spent a sleepless night wrestling with the implications of everything he had learned about Gabrielle and her family. The comfort of his luxury penthouse felt suffocating rather than satisfying, and every expensive item he looked at seemed to mock him with reminders of the financial pressures facing the woman who cleaned around them each week. The letter lay on his nightstand, and he found himself reading it again in the early morning hours, each word carrying new weight after witnessing her daily reality firsthand. By dawn, Jonathan had made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. He was going to help Gabrielle's family, but he was going to do it carefully and thoughtfully, in a way that respected her dignity and didn't create new problems or dependencies. The challenge was figuring out how to provide assistance without appearing condescending or making her feel like a charity case rather than the competent, deserving woman he now recognized her to be. His first priority was addressing her mother's medical situation. Jonathan had connections throughout the city's medical community through his various business ventures and charitable contributions. He spent the morning making discreet inquiries about the best specialists for diabetes management and the most effective treatment programs available. What he learned reinforced everything Gabrielle had written about the impossible choices facing working families who needed consistent medical care. Dr. Sarah Kim, an endocrinologist at the city's premier medical center, explained the situation bluntly when Jonathan called to discuss hypothetical treatment options. Diabetes is completely manageable with proper medication, regular monitoring and dietary support, she said. But the patients who struggle most are those who can't afford consistent treatment. They skip doses to make medication last longer, delay appointments because they can't afford the co-pays, and end up in emergency situations that are far more expensive and dangerous than preventive care would have been. The description matched exactly what Gabrielle had alluded to in her letter about her mother's condition. Jonathan arranged for an anonymous benefactor himself to establish a medical fund that would cover Rosa Washington's complete treatment, including medication, regular appointments, and any specialized care she might need. The arrangement was structured through the hospital's financial assistance program, making it appear to be need-based aid rather than personal charity. Next, Jonathan turned his attention to the educational opportunities available to Gabrielle's daughters. His research into their current school confirmed what he had observed during his visit: dedicated teachers working with inadequate resources to serve students who deserved better opportunities. He contacted the admissions office at Riverside Preparatory Academy, a prestigious private school known for its academic excellence and need-based scholarship program. The conversation with the admissions director revealed that both Hope and Destiny Washington would be excellent candidates for full scholarships based on their academic records and potential. Jonathan arranged to fund their complete education: tuition, books, uniforms, and extracurricular activities through an anonymous donor program that would make it appear to be merit-based financial aid rather than personal intervention. The most delicate aspect of Jonathan's plan involved Gabrielle herself. Her letter had demonstrated intelligence, professionalism, and leadership potential that were being wasted in her current employment situation. He began researching opportunities within his own business empire where her skills could be properly utilized and developed. His property management company needed a facilities coordinator who could oversee multiple locations and manage vendor relationships, a role that would utilize her attention to detail, reliability, and people skills while providing significantly better compensation and benefits. Jonathan spent several days crafting a plan that would appear to be a natural progression of opportunities rather than obvious charity. The medical assistance would come through established hospital programs, the educational scholarships would be processed through normal academic channels, and the job opportunity would be presented as a business decision based on her demonstrated competence. Each element was designed to preserve Gabrielle's dignity while addressing the specific challenges she had described in her letter. The emotional weight of planning these interventions surprised Jonathan. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely excited about using his wealth and influence for something beyond personal gain. The cynicism that had guided his business decisions and personal relationships began to crack as he imagined the relief and joy these opportunities might bring to a family that had impressed him with their grace under pressure. But alongside his excitement, Jonathan felt a deep sadness about the time he had wasted in ignorance and prejudice. How many other talented people had he overlooked or dismissed because they didn't fit his narrow expectations? How many opportunities for meaningful connection had he missed because of his defensive assumptions about others' motivations? The realization that his wealth had isolated him from rather than connected him to the best qualities in humanity was both sobering and motivating. He found himself thinking constantly about Gabrielle's daughters and the futures that were now possible for them. Hope's mathematical abilities could be developed through advanced courses and specialized programs that would prepare her for careers in engineering, finance, or technology. Destiny's artistic talents could be nurtured through art classes, museum programs, and mentorship opportunities that would help her explore creative careers. The scholarships would provide not just education but access to networks and resources that could transform their life trajectories entirely. The impact on Rose's health and quality of life was equally significant. With proper medical care, she could become more active in her granddaughters' lives, potentially even return to some form of employment if her condition improved. The stress relief for the entire family would be immeasurable. No more impossible choices between medication and other necessities, no more emergency room visits that could have been prevented with regular care. For Gabrielle herself, the career opportunity represented validation of her capabilities and a chance to build the kind of professional future she had only dreamed about. The facilities coordinator position would provide health insurance for her entire family, a retirement savings plan, opportunities for professional development, and a salary that would eliminate the financial pressures that had dominated her adult life. Jonathan realized that his assistance would create a ripple effect extending far beyond immediate relief. Gabrielle's success in a professional role would provide an example for her daughters about what was possible with education and determination. Rose's improved health would allow her to contribute more to the household and family stability. The girls' educational opportunities would prepare them to become leaders and contributors in their own right, potentially helping other families in similar situations. The transformation in Jonathan's own perspective was equally profound. The hollow feeling that had characterized his wealthy lifestyle was being replaced by a sense of purpose and connection that he hadn't experienced since his early business days. The idea that his resources could be used to unlock human potential rather than simply accumulate more wealth gave meaning to years of financial success that had increasingly felt empty and isolating. As he finalized the details of his plan, Jonathan felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation about how Gabrielle would respond. Her letter had demonstrated pride and independence that might make her suspicious of sudden opportunities that seemed too good to be true. He would need to present each element carefully, emphasizing the legitimate basis for the assistance while being prepared to respect her decisions about what help she was comfortable accepting. The irony wasn't lost on him that his attempt to test her character had ultimately led to the most meaningful and satisfying use of his wealth in decades. By trying to prove that people were fundamentally untrustworthy, he had discovered someone whose integrity and strength challenged him to become a better version of himself. The letter in his safe had become a catalyst for changes that would transform multiple lives, starting with his own. The implementation of Jonathan's plan required careful timing and discreet coordination with multiple institutions, but his business experience had taught him how to manage complex projects while maintaining confidentiality. He began with Rose's medical situation, knowing that improved health for Gabrielle's mother would provide the foundation for all other positive changes in the family's circumstances. Dr. Kim's office called Rosa Washington on a Tuesday morning, explaining that she had been selected for a comprehensive diabetes management program funded by an anonymous donor who wanted to support working families facing medical challenges. The program would provide all necessary medications, regular monitoring equipment, nutritional counseling, and quarterly appointments with specialists, everything needed to manage her condition effectively without financial stress. Rosa's initial response was suspicious, as Jonathan had expected. She had learned to be wary of offers that seemed too generous, knowing that desperation could lead families to accept help that came with hidden costs or obligations. But the hospital's financial counselor patiently explained that the program was legitimate, funded by a successful businessman who had established the foundation to honor his late mother's memory. The story was true. Jonathan had indeed lost his mother to complications from diabetes that could have been prevented with better care. When Gabrielle arrived home from work that evening, she found her mother sitting at the kitchen table with tears of joy streaming down her face and a folder full of medical information spread before her. Rosa's explanation of the program was interrupted repeatedly by expressions of gratitude and disbelief, but gradually Gabrielle understood that her mother would finally receive the consistent, quality care she needed without the family having to choose between medication and other necessities. The relief Gabrielle felt was overwhelming. For 2 years she had watched her mother's health deteriorate while being unable to afford the level of care that could halt and reverse the damage. The constant worry about medication costs, the fear of emergency situations they couldn't afford to handle, the guilt about not being able to provide better support, all of these burdens were suddenly lifted by a program that seemed too wonderful to be real. 3 days later, the letter from Riverside Preparatory Academy arrived, addressed to Hope and Destiny, Washington. The envelope was thick with application materials and information packets, but the cover letter made the opportunity clear immediately. Both girls had been nominated for academic scholarships based on their outstanding performance at their current school and their potential for continued excellence. The scholarships would cover complete educational expenses, including books, uniforms, transportation, and extracurricular activities. Hope and Destiny's reactions were markedly different but equally touching. Hope, ever practical like her mother, immediately began asking questions about the requirements and expectations associated with the scholarship. She wanted to understand exactly what would be expected of her and how she could ensure that she lived up to the opportunity being offered. Destiny, more emotionally expressive, simply cried with happiness while hugging the letter to her chest and talking about all the art classes and programs she would finally be able to participate in. Gabrielle's response was more complex. Her initial joy was tempered by the same wariness her mother had expressed about the medical program. 2 extraordinary opportunities arriving within a week seemed suspiciously coincidental, and her experience had taught her to question good fortune that appeared without obvious explanation. But the scholarship paperwork was legitimate, processed through normal academic channels, and the school's reputation was unquestionable. The girls had earned this opportunity through their own efforts and achievements. The timing of Jonathan's job offer was carefully calculated to appear as a natural business decision rather than personal charity. He waited 2 weeks after the scholarship notifications, then had his human resources director contact Gabrielle about a new position that had become available in the company's property management division. The facilities coordinator role required someone with proven reliability, attention to detail, and the ability to manage multiple locations and vendor relationships. When Gabrielle received the call requesting an interview, she was initially confused about how the company had learned about her availability for employment. The HR director explained that her current employer Jonathan Pierce had provided a reference when asked about reliable service providers who might be interested in expanded professional opportunities. The explanation was truthful, even if it didn't reveal the complete motivation behind the inquiry. The interview process was conducted professionally, with Jonathan deliberately absent to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Gabrielle's performance during the interview impressed the entire management team, confirming Jonathan's assessment that her capabilities far exceeded her current job responsibilities. Her thoughtful questions about the position, her clear understanding of professional expectations, and her obvious intelligence made the hiring decision unanimous. The salary offer was generous but not suspiciously high enough to provide financial security and health benefits for her family while remaining within normal ranges for similar positions. The benefits package included health insurance that would cover her mother's ongoing medical needs, a retirement savings plan with company matching, and opportunities for professional development and advancement. Most importantly, the position offered respect, recognition, and the chance to use her skills in meaningful ways. Gabrielle's acceptance of the job offer was emotional and gracious. During her final week of cleaning houses, she thanked each client for the opportunity to work for them, maintaining her professionalism even as she prepared to transition to a completely different career path. Her dignity and grace during this transition impressed Jonathan even more than her performance during the interview process. The cumulative impact of these changes on the Washington family was transformative but also surprisingly natural. Rosa's improved health allowed her to take on more household responsibilities, freeing Gabrielle to focus on her new career without worrying constantly about her mother's well-being. The girls' excitement about their new school motivated them to work even harder academically, and their obvious happiness brought additional joy to the entire family dynamic. Jonathan watched these changes unfold from a respectful distance, receiving updates through normal business channels about Gabrielle's performance in her new role and occasional reports from the medical center and school about the family's progress. The satisfaction he felt was unlike anything he had experienced through his previous business successes or personal achievements. Knowing that his resources had unlocked potential and relieved suffering without creating dependency or undermining dignity gave meaning to his wealth that had been missing for years. The ripple effects extended beyond the immediate family. Other parents in the neighborhood noticed the changes in the Washington household and began asking Gabrielle for advice about educational opportunities and medical resources. Her success story became an example of what was possible with persistence, integrity, and the right support at the right time. Without intending to, Jonathan had created a model for meaningful philanthropy that focused on empowering individuals rather than creating ongoing dependency. 3 months into her new position, Gabrielle had established herself as an exceptional facilities coordinator, earning praise from building managers, vendors, and tenants throughout Jonathan's property portfolio. Her attention to detail, professional communication skills, and ability to solve problems efficiently had impressed everyone she worked with. The transformation from housekeeper to business professional had been seamless, confirming Jonathan's belief that her talents had been dramatically underutilized in her previous employment. The revelation of Jonathan's role in her family's recent good fortune came about by accident, through a conversation that neither of them had planned or expected. Gabrielle was conducting a routine inspection of the penthouse building where Jonathan lived, checking on recent maintenance work and coordinating with contractors about upcoming improvements. As the building's facilities coordinator, she now had professional reasons to be in the same spaces where she had once worked as a housekeeper. Jonathan arrived home from a business meeting while Gabrielle was reviewing electrical system updates with the building's maintenance supervisor. Seeing her in the lobby wearing a business suit, carrying a professional portfolio, and speaking knowledgeably about building management systems created a moment of profound cognitive dissonance. This confident, articulate woman was clearly the same person who had cleaned his home for 6 months, but her transformation was so complete that he almost didn't recognize her. Their professional greeting was polite but formal, as appropriate for a building owner and facilities coordinator who had no apparent personal relationship. But Gabrielle's sharp intelligence, which had been evident in her letter but invisible during their previous interactions, picked up on subtle cues that suggested Jonathan knew more about her transition than a building owner should. His questions about her adjustment to the new role were too specific, his knowledge of her family situation too detailed for someone who was supposedly meeting her for the first time in a professional context. The moment of recognition came when Jonathan unconsciously referenced something from her letter, her daughter's names and academic interests, in what he intended as casual small talk. The slip was minor, but Gabrielle's expression changed immediately as she realized that this conversation revealed knowledge he shouldn't possess if their relationship was purely professional. Her eyes widened as the connections began forming in her mind, and Jonathan saw the exact moment when she understood the truth about the medical program, the scholarships, and the job opportunity. "You read my letter," she said quietly, her voice carrying a mixture of realization, gratitude, and something that might have been embarrassment. "You're the anonymous donor who's been helping my family." It wasn't a question but a statement of fact, delivered with the same directness and honesty that had characterized her written communication months earlier. Jonathan felt his carefully constructed cover story crumble under the weight of Gabrielle's intuitive understanding and his own subconscious desire to be recognized for the good he had tried to do. The months of discreet assistance and professional distance suddenly seemed artificial and unnecessary when faced with her direct, knowing gaze. He nodded slowly, uncertain how she would react to the confirmation of what she had already figured out. The conversation that followed took place in Jonathan's penthouse, with both of them settling into the living room where Gabrielle had once worked silently while he remained invisible to her humanity and potential. The role reversal was striking now. She was the one with professional responsibilities and financial security, while he was the one feeling vulnerable and uncertain about how his actions would be interpreted. Gabrielle's first response was overwhelming gratitude expressed with the same eloquence she had demonstrated in her letter. She thanked him not just for the financial assistance but for the way he had provided it, with respect for her dignity and careful attention to making the help appear legitimate rather than charitable. She understood that he could have simply handed her money or offered direct assistance, but that he had instead created opportunities that allowed her to maintain her pride and self-respect. "What you've done for my family," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "is more than I ever dreamed possible. But the way you did it, making sure my mother felt worthy of the medical care, making sure my daughters earned their scholarships, making sure I had the chance to prove myself professionally, that shows a kind of wisdom and kindness I've never experienced before." But Gabrielle's gratitude was accompanied by questions that revealed her continued sharp analysis of the situation. She wanted to understand why Jonathan had initially left his safe open, why he had tested her honesty, and what had changed his perspective so dramatically. Her questions weren't accusatory but genuinely curious, as if she was trying to understand the complete story behind the transformation in both their circumstances. Jonathan's explanation was halting and honest, beginning with his admission that he had deliberately tested her character because of his cynical assumptions about human nature. He described his shock at finding her letter instead of missing money, his emotional response to learning about her real circumstances, and his growing shame about his own prejudices and blindness. The conversation became a mutual revelation as both of them shared perspectives and experiences that had been invisible during their previous interactions. The most powerful moment came when Jonathan apologized for his initial suspicions and assumptions. "I spent 6 months employing someone of obvious intelligence and character while being too prejudiced and self-absorbed to recognize your worth," he said. "Your letter didn't just prove your honesty, it revealed my own moral failings and challenged me to become a better person. Everything I've done since then has been as much about my own growth as about helping your family." Gabrielle's response demonstrated the same grace and wisdom that had impressed him in her letter. Rather than expressing anger about his initial test or resentment about his assumptions, she focused on the positive outcomes and the lessons both of them had learned. "Maybe we both needed this experience," she said thoughtfully. "You needed to rediscover faith in human goodness, and I needed to believe that my integrity and hard work would eventually be recognized and rewarded." The conversation continued for hours, covering topics they had never had the opportunity to discuss during their previous relationship. Jonathan learned about Gabrielle's educational goals, her dreams for her daughter's futures, and her hopes for continuing to grow professionally. Gabrielle learned about Jonathan's business philosophy, his family background, and his growing interest in using his wealth for meaningful philanthropy rather than personal accumulation. By the end of their conversation, both of them understood that their relationship had evolved far beyond employer and employee, donor and recipient, or even business associates. They had become something more complex and valuable, two people who had challenged each other to grow and change in ways that made them both better versions of themselves. The weeks following their honest conversation marked the beginning of a professional partnership that surprised both Jonathan and Gabrielle with its natural development and mutual benefit. Gabrielle's exceptional performance as facilities coordinator had caught the attention of other executives in Jonathan's business empire, leading to opportunities for expanded responsibilities and professional growth that neither of them had anticipated when the job was first offered. Jonathan found himself seeking Gabrielle's input on business decisions that extended beyond her official responsibilities. Her practical intelligence, attention to detail, and ability to understand complex situations from multiple perspectives made her insights valuable for strategic planning and problem-solving. She approached business challenges with the same methodical competence she had brought to managing her household budget and coordinating her family's needs, skills that translated surprisingly well to corporate decision-making. The trust that developed between them was built on mutual respect and shared values rather than gratitude or obligation. Gabrielle had proven that she could succeed professionally without any connection to their personal history, while Jonathan had demonstrated that his assistance had been motivated by genuine admiration rather than self-serving charity. Both of them could interact as equals who chose to work together because of their compatibility and effectiveness as a team. Gabrielle's integration into Jonathan's business operations revealed capabilities that impressed everyone she worked with. Her ability to communicate effectively with vendors, tenants, and employees at all organizational levels stemmed from her experience navigating different social and economic environments. She understood both the challenges facing working families and the expectations of wealthy clients, allowing her to bridge gaps that other managers might not even recognize. The most significant development was Gabrielle's proposal for a company-wide employee assistance program based on her own experience with the challenges facing working families. She had researched the costs of employee turnover, absenteeism, and decreased productivity associated with financial stress, medical emergencies, and family crises. Her presentation to the executive team outlined a comprehensive support system that could improve employee retention while demonstrating corporate social responsibility. Jonathan was impressed not just by the practical wisdom of Gabrielle's proposal but by her ability to present it professionally and persuasively. She had identified a business problem, researched potential solutions, calculated costs and benefits, and developed an implementation plan that addressed potential concerns and obstacles. The presentation demonstrated executive-level thinking and communication skills that made her promotion to Director of Employee Relations both logical and well-deserved. The Employee Assistance Program became a model for other companies, generating positive publicity and recognition that enhanced the business's reputation while helping hundreds of families avoid the kinds of crises Gabrielle had faced. The program's success led to speaking opportunities and consulting requests that established Gabrielle as an expert in corporate social responsibility and employee welfare programs. Jonathan's role evolved from benefactor to mentor and eventually to business partner as Gabrielle's contributions became essential to multiple aspects of the company's operations. Her understanding of both business strategy and human needs made her uniquely qualified to identify opportunities for expansion and improvement that other executives might overlook. Their working relationship became a partnership of equals who brought different strengths and perspectives to shared challenges. The transformation in their personal relationship was equally significant but more subtle. The formal distance they had maintained during Gabrielle's transition to professional employment gradually gave way to genuine friendship based on mutual admiration and shared experiences. They discovered common interests in books, community service, and business innovation that provided the foundation for conversations and activities that extended beyond their professional collaboration. Gabrielle's daughters had thrived at Riverside Preparatory Academy, with Hope excelling in advanced mathematics and science courses while Destiny had discovered talents in drama and creative writing as well as visual arts. Both girls had developed friendships with classmates from diverse backgrounds and had begun to envision college and career possibilities that would have been unimaginable just months earlier. Their success validated Jonathan's investment while providing Gabrielle with the deep satisfaction of seeing her sacrifices and dedication rewarded. Rosa's health had stabilized and improved dramatically with consistent medical care and proper medication management. She had been able to return to part-time work as a childcare provider, contributing to the household income while staying active and engaged with her community. Her recovery had eliminated much of the stress and worry that had dominated the family's daily life, allowing everyone to focus on growth and opportunity rather than survival and crisis management. The ripple effects of the Washington family's transformation continued to expand throughout their community. Gabrielle had become an informal mentor and resource for other single mothers facing similar challenges, sharing information about educational opportunities, medical resources, and professional development programs. Her success story had inspired others to pursue goals they had previously considered impossible, creating a network of mutual support and encouragement. Jonathan's perspective on wealth and responsibility had continued to evolve through his partnership with Gabrielle and his exposure to the challenges facing working families. He had established a foundation focused on educational opportunities and healthcare access, with Gabrielle serving as a board member and program director. The foundation's approach emphasized empowerment and opportunity rather than traditional charity, reflecting the lessons both of them had learned from their own experiences. Their professional and personal relationship had become a source of satisfaction and growth for both of them. Jonathan had rediscovered purpose and meaning in his business success, while Gabrielle had found opportunities to use her talents and experience to help others while building a secure future for her family. The mutual respect and trust they had developed provided a foundation for continued collaboration and friendship that enriched both their lives. The boy who had grown up wealthy but emotionally isolated and the woman who had struggled financially but maintained strong family connections had found in their partnership a balance that made them both more complete and effective. Their different backgrounds and experiences had become complementary strengths rather than barriers to understanding, creating a relationship that was professionally productive and personally fulfilling for both of them. 1 year after the letter in the safe had changed both their lives, Jonathan and Gabrielle stood together in the conference room of the newly established Washington Pierce Foundation, surrounded by representatives from schools, medical centers, and community organizations who had benefited from their innovative approach to philanthropy. The foundation's first annual report showed impressive results. 200 families had received comprehensive support services, dozens of small businesses had received development assistance, and 3 new community programs had been established to provide ongoing resources for working families. The foundation's success reflected the partnership that Jonathan and Gabrielle had developed, combining his financial resources and business acumen with her understanding of community needs and practical solutions. Their approach focused on creating sustainable opportunities rather than providing temporary relief, ensuring that assistance led to long-term improvement rather than ongoing dependency. The model had attracted attention from other philanthropists and organizations interested in more effective methods of community development. Gabrielle's professional growth had exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. Her promotion to executive director of the foundation had been based on merit and performance rather than personal relationships, confirmed by the board of directors who had worked with her on various projects. Her innovative programs and effective management had earned recognition from business organizations, community groups, and academic institutions studying corporate social responsibility. The Washington family's transformation was complete but not finished. It represented a new beginning rather than a final destination. Hope had been accepted to a prestigious summer mathematics program at a major university, while Destiny had won a statewide art competition and was considering pursuing theater as well as visual arts. Both girls had developed the confidence and skills necessary to pursue whatever careers they chose, with the security of knowing that their mother had created a foundation for their success. Rosa had become an active volunteer with the Foundation's childcare program, using her experience raising grandchildren to help other families navigate work-life balance challenges. Her health remained stable and her spirits high, and she had become a beloved figure in the community for her wisdom and generosity. The 3 generations of Washington women had created a legacy of resilience, integrity, and service that extended far beyond their own family. Jonathan's personal transformation was equally dramatic but more private. The cynicism and isolation that had characterized his wealthy lifestyle had been replaced by genuine connections with people from all walks of life. His business decisions now considered employee welfare and community impact alongside financial returns, creating a more sustainable and socially responsible approach to wealth creation. He had discovered that using his resources to unlock human potential was far more satisfying than simply accumulating additional wealth. The relationship between Jonathan and Gabrielle had evolved into something that neither of them had expected when their story began. Their professional partnership was based on mutual respect and shared values, their personal friendship on genuine affection and common interests. They had become family in the truest sense, people who supported each other's growth and celebrated each other's successes while working together toward goals that benefited their broader community. The anniversary celebration concluded with a private dinner at Jonathan's penthouse, where the Washington family had been invited to share their reflections on the year's changes and their hopes for the future. The contrast with Gabrielle's first visits to the same space was striking. She now entered as an honored guest and trusted partner rather than an invisible employee, while her daughters explored the home with the confidence of welcome visitors rather than the careful distance of strangers. During dinner, Hope and Destiny shared their academic achievements and future plans with the enthusiasm of young people who believed that any goal was attainable with sufficient effort and preparation. Their confidence and ambition reflected the transformation in their family circumstances but also the values that Gabrielle had instilled in them throughout their lives. They understood that their opportunities came with responsibilities to use their talents and advantages to help others facing similar challenges. Rosa's toast to the assembled group captured the spirit of gratitude and hope that characterized their celebration. "A year ago we were struggling just to survive," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Tonight, we're planning how to help other families find the same opportunities we've been given. That's not just a change in our circumstances, it's a transformation in what we believe is possible when people work together with kindness and respect." Jonathan's response acknowledged the lessons he had learned and the ways his own life had been enriched by his relationship with the Washington family. "I thought I was testing Gabrielle's character," he said, "but she ended up revealing mine and challenging me to become someone worthy of her trust and friendship. The letter she left in my safe changed my understanding of wealth, responsibility, and what it means to live a meaningful life." Gabrielle's reflection focused on the importance of maintaining the values and relationships that had sustained her family through difficult times while embracing the opportunities that had emerged from their changed circumstances. "Success isn't just about reaching your goals," she said. "It's about who you become in the process and whether you remember to help others along the way. Our story isn't really about money or status, it's about recognizing the good in each other and working together to make that goodness grow." As the evening concluded and the Washington family prepared to return to their comfortable new home in a safe neighborhood with excellent schools, Jonathan felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with business achievements or financial success. The letter in the safe had led to discoveries about human nature, personal character, and the potential for positive change that were far more valuable than any amount of money. The test he had designed to confirm his cynical beliefs about people had instead revealed the possibility of trust, partnership, and mutual growth that had transformed multiple lives. Gabrielle's integrity and resilience had challenged him to become a better version of himself, while his resources and support had allowed her family to achieve dreams they had never dared to voice. Together, they had created something more meaningful and lasting than either could have accomplished alone. Standing at his window as the Washington family's car disappeared into the night, Jonathan reflected on the year's changes and the future possibilities that stretched ahead. The foundation would continue to grow and evolve, providing opportunities for other families while serving as a model for effective philanthropy. His business ventures would continue to prosper while maintaining their commitment to employee welfare and community development. Most importantly, he had discovered that wealth's greatest value lay not in what it could buy for himself but in what it could unlock for others. The letter in the safe had become a symbol of the trust, hope, and possibility that could emerge when people chose to see beyond their assumptions and prejudices to recognize the humanity and potential in each other. It represented a new beginning for everyone involved, a foundation for continued growth and service that would impact their community for generations to come.